Welcome back to A Bit of Curiosity. I'm your host, Jeremy Howlett. I'm really excited today to have Dale and Brittany Majors on. Brittany and Dale have six kids, four boys and two girls, ranging from the age of 4 to 15. While Dale's building a variety of businesses, Brittany has the work and of running their household. Together, they have bike toured over 3,000 miles as a family, from Canada to Mexico, Amsterdam to Lisbon, Nantes, France to Stuttgart, Germany. Then this past year, the Mediterranean to the North Sea with the family. Brittany is the logistical brains behind the bike tours and took over the management of everything after Dale led a couple tours that included nights spent in the airport. So hopefully we can get into some of those stories. But so tell us, like, it's one thing to bike tour across the country, but tell us what it's like to do it with six kids in tow.
Yes. Well, and one correction, we didn't do Amsterdam to Lisbon as a family. So across France a few times, but yeah. And I think it's closer to 4,000 miles toured. So what's it like to bike tour with family?
Yeah.
Controlled chaos, exciting, new, stressful in a fun, exciting way. It's more of a like a type 2 adventure where you are it's really fun to look back on. And a lot of times it's fun during the trip as well, but it's one of those yeah, I don't know if you've heard of type 1 fun versus type 2 fun.
Now explain that for us.
No, well, it's that idea of going to Lagoon is just fun, where going on a really long hike is kind of fun, but it's also hard. But when you look back on it, you're like, oh, that was really cool. So that's type 2 fun.
Yeah.
I
Okay.
always, I always tell people that it's more of an adventure than it is a vacation.
Well, we've heard a lot about adventure travel in the past couple of decades, right? Like adventure travel has been become kind of a little cliche, but this like takes adventure travel to a whole nother level. I've been to all 50 states with my kids. My wife and my four kids have been, and we road trip to every state except for Alaska and Hawaii. And one of the biggest questions I get is like, aside from, okay, what's your favorite state? The next big question is, how did your kids do on that trip, right? Like, so that's them in a car, often with a phone or an iPad. Here they're having to bike and pedal, and they don't have entertainment other than the surroundings around them. So, how do they do?
They vary depending on the kid, and to say they have no entertainment's probably not true. Like the oldest, like they love listening to books, audiobooks,
Yeah,
and so the oldest will listen to different audiobooks along the way. But a lot of it too is when you're pedaling and biking, you don't need that much entertainment because you're exercising and you're putting in the effort and you can kind of just see everything as you're going along. It's not like you're just sitting. You're actually having to like work for it, so there's not as much need for entertainment. What do you think?
Yeah, I would also add that we've done some road tripping, and especially with smaller kids, it seems like they fight less when they are expending their energy throughout the day. So you kind of wear them out. So they're always hungry, and they're always tired to sleep at the end of the day, which I think could make it easier than road tripping.
yeah, that I can see that. So,
And your original question was just how do they do? Um, you have to keep in mind too that we didn't just like take one big giant trip like all of a sudden. They were
sure.
like we've been taking bike trips with these kids since they were tiny. Like from the time that they can be in the trailer, they're in the trailer and we're the bike trailer and we're taking these little small trips even if it's just to our local like grocery store. They're like we're slowly like exposing them to things to the point where they think this is very normal and it's not a big deal to them. They're like, oh, 10 miles, 20 miles, 30 miles, that's fine because they've been conditioned.
Yeah. No, that's great. Our conversation before we got started, right? Like you said, start young, and I'm past the point where I can start young with my kids, right? But I think for anybody listening that's like, hey, this looks like a fun adventure, I think that's great advice, right? Like start small, kind of get them conditioned to be able to go and do, because it's like it's training for anything, right? Like I've run ultra marathons, and you can't just jump into it and say, okay, I'm gonna go run 50 kilometers, right? Like there's some conditioning that has to take place. And I think that with our kids, there's physical conditioning, but I think even more so, in your experience, I don't know, mental conditioning seems like the hardest thing for our kids. Would you agree?
I would agree.
Before you said that, I wrote the word mindset down on my piece of paper. That's for any adventure. I tell people that you need three things. Like with kids, to like power them and get them to do anything you want, you need three things. You need tons of food that they'll like and eat. So it doesn't have to be healthy food. It just needs to be like, we took our kids to Kings Peak last month, a few of them, and my strategy is as much food as you can get them. So we're going to the store, we're buying junk food, snacks, a variety of calories,
Yeah.
and then pump them full of liquids. So you're working on the nutrition, and then it's all about energy, and you're pumping them full of good vibes and energy and encouragement and positivity. And it's a very, you're managing the energy, because a lot of times people can get into their own funk. Like physiologically, we're very capable to ride 50 miles. If someone's life were on the line, you could say, hey, you'll die if you don't ride 50 miles today. Like most people in America could just like muster that to do it.
Sure.
But mentally, it's a whole other thing.
Yeah. So, have there been meltdowns on these
Yeah.
journeys?
Have there not
Every
been
day.
meltdowns?
Yeah. It's just like home life. It's just like home life. There's always a meltdown at some point during the day with some kid, Like it's not like it's maybe like ramped up a bit, but on these trips, but it's you still have all the same personality issues. And I mean, we had one daughter, she was like, how old was she? Hazel.
6.
She was like 6 or 7 when she first did her first bike tour. And we had prepared her, we knew she could do the mileage. But the first, like we got on the bikes right away, like within a mile, she'd thrown her bike down. I'm not doing this. I'm going to stay here. I hate bikes.
And this was how far? How far did she go on this
Oh,
tour?
like a mile. It was like a mile
Well,
in.
but like
Well, it was 180 miles.
180-mile
Total
tour. Okay.
trip.
That one, I guess we did 500 miles on a few different trails, but
Yeah, that
it
we
was
hopped
the
around.
first day of a week ride, and we had to go 120 miles. And that day was a 20-mile ride, and she had thrown her bike down at mile 1, and I stayed back with her, and Brittany and the kids just went forward. I'm like, we kind of have to go, and we already left the car, and it is what it is. And if you want to cry, I don't care if you cry. You can cry.
Let it out.
You should cry. Let it all out. But we are going to ride today.
So did she? I assume she finished the 20.
Yeah.
And then
Yeah,
the rest of the
later
bike
on
tour.
that trip, she did a 42-mile day. So she was 5, almost 6 at the time. And she rode 42 miles in one of our days when we had to do a big climb.
That's awesome.
There's a lot of like kind, positive pushing that happens because, they're kids. They decide what they want and what they don't want to do. So you kind of have to navigate that, as kindly as possible. But it's kind of nice because when we're on these trails and whatnot, we're kind of in the middle of nowhere. So you definitely have this vibe of, well, you could stay here, but I'm not sure you'd live with the animals kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
So we just have to go.
Isn't that like us as adults a lot of the time too, though? Like sometimes we just need the prodding, and maybe we need to let out a little cry or a big cry. Sometimes
Yes.
we got to throw our bike down at mile 1, but then
Oh, the adults occasionally will throw their bikes down. Yeah.
yeah, I'm sure. So what inspired these adventures? Like was this all like Dale's riding these long rides and it's like, okay, let's just all jump in tow, or like what led to this is like this should be a family thing?
Yeah. So Brittany had, when we got married, our honeymoon was riding our bikes from San Francisco to San Luis Obispo. So probably
Okay.
300 or 400 miles at
So
the
this
time.
started
And she-
right from the beginning.
Yeah, so she was like adventurous and fit and loved this kind of thing, and she'd ridden her bike around her college town. So, but the first 20-mile bike tour that we did to my aunt's house, I think was her longest ride.
Yeah.
And then a week later in California, she did like a 70-mile day. And then when we had a kid, Kimball was, 14 months old, and we thought we're going to ride our bikes to Yellowstone. We'll go to Yellowstone.
From Utah?
From Salt Lake. Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
But we only made it to Logan. And
Okay.
then we turned around and zipped home. We actually ended up staying like one night in this dude's like spare bedroom. That's, anyways, that's the story. But
I don't know if we should gloss over that story. We got to hear that
Brittany's
story.
like, well, so here's the quick, concise, like here's the quick first bike tour. So when people say like, Dale, it's so amazing, you and your wife take your kids for 3 months to Europe and ride through the Alps and the beautiful pictures and the scenery and everything. I was like, oh, if you only knew like what other trips we had to go on for that to happen, the progression, And I'd say that we ride 5 miles to the Kaysville Theater, or to the Kaysville Smiths. That's 5 miles from us. And even when we do that, some of the kids are like, "Are we almost there?" And these are kids that have ridden, 50 miles.
Yeah.
So I have this idea. We're going to ride to Yellowstone. And Brittany didn't know about my plan skill set to this point. I had done a lot of long tours, but they were like, she didn't know that it meant like sleeping in fields and not eating, and like she didn't know those elements of it. So I'm like, babe, we're going to do this bike tour. It'll be awesome. And we'll just go north. I didn't even find a route. Like I was like, oh, 89 and other things. We'll just go. And so on day one, it's hot and traffic is crazy. And we get to Willard Bay, 25, 30 miles, where we give our 14-month-old a little swim in the Willard Bay. And then the next day we ride to Crystal Hot Springs, and same thing, but it's hot and hilly and traffic and just not enjoyable. And then the next day we make it to Logan, and we crash at the Olive Garden. And we're there for hours. We stay at the Olive Garden for hours eating, and just hanging out in the air conditioning, because it was June, July, super hot.
So hot.
And we're just there, and then we get out at, a couple hours before sunset, and we start. And for me, my plan for that night, which wasn't much of a plan, was we'll just ride up the canyon and camp. And then we start going up the canyon and realize, oh, the traffic is kind of terrible going up the canyon now. We don't want to ride up there. Oh, and then my second plan was we'll just ride into the valley and camp. We're just going to go, we're in Logan, a city. We're just going to go to the valley and camp, which turns out to not be much of a plan. So we're riding through the valley, which is just, a residential neighborhood.
Yep.
And I see this lady walking her dog. I'm like, hey, do you know of like a place, just a field somewhere where we can just, set out and camp? And we have our tandem and our bike trailer. And she's like, oh, yeah, maybe, let me think about it. Actually, my daughter has a house, and you can probably stay in her front yard. And I'm thinking, this must be like a big estate to have a front yard for us to sleep in front of, to go to. So and I have a personal rule of never refusing hospitality. So we follow this lady, and she walks into a trailer park. She takes a right, and we're just passing everybody. Everybody's out on their porch. Hey, we're like in our spandex with a little baby. And then she pulls to the end of the road, and there was the driveway was 6 feet wide. So grass on the side of the driveway, 6 feet wide, big enough for our tent. And she said, my daughter's not home, but you can probably stay here. I'm like, so I'm like, okay. I start to take the tent out. Brittany's holding the baby.
I'm cringing this whole time. I'm just like about to have like a panic attack meltdown mode.
Okay, so before we carry on with this story, like, did this not come out on the honeymoon ride from San Francisco to San Luis Obispo? Like,
there was lots of campsites along that one. Lots of different campsites, so it was never an issue.
She didn't know the depth of my touring skill set.
Didn't realize.
Okay, all right. So we're in the trailer park. We're in the front yard.
She hadn't seen the more scrappy tactics, so we're in the front yard, and I'm like laying out the tarp, and she's holding the crying baby.
And I'm looking at the Hampton Inn that's just
Yes, it was a
Right, just
Hampton
right
Inn.
there.
Across the field, across the big field, she's living in Hampton.
I'm
But
saying, why are we not just getting a hotel?
and for me, I'm thinking, babe, you don't go all the way to Yellowstone staying in hotels every night because that all of a sudden makes this a $4,000 trip and not a $400 trip. So, anyways, so the lady comes back to us, and 5 minutes later, as I'm like putting a tarp on the dirt in the driveway, essentially, and says, "Hey, Jerry has a backyard. He saw you guys come in, and he said you can stay in the backyard." And I'm like, "Awesome, let's check it out." So we go over and we bring our and I go walk over to Jerry's backyard, and I see, and it was a backyard, overgrown,
Knee high.
knee-high grass, just this little thing. But it was a definite upgrade from what we had. But when I step into the backyard, Jerry's like, "Hey, I've got a spare room." I'm like, "Let's check it out." So I walk right into Jerry's house. He's got a spare room, spare bed, and then that's where we stayed. So I still remember the two memories from that: bathing Kimball in his bathtub, our oldest, which was just funny and cute and whatever. And then the second one was Jerry walking in, hand on the door frame, in his whitey tighties, saying, bidding us a good night. Hey, have a good night, because it was so hot with the
No AC.
no, well, there was a swamp cooler, so we had to keep the door open. But he was very kind.
And this is another reason why we love bike touring. You see another side of people that's not portrayed on social media and the news. People are kind and good, and they're like, it's impressive how many good people. We run into way more good people than we ever do bad, like grumpy, mean people, right? Like,
Yeah.
there's people have good hearts out there, and you just constantly see it when you're in like a vulnerable situation.
No,
We've
it's
only met two crazies.
We have met a few critics.
no, that's awesome. I love that. Like, because as we are vulnerable, we need to lean on others, right? And that's when true community comes out, right? Is when in our vulnerabilities. And I think there's a lot of lessons that we could draw from that, right? So, okay, so none of this really came out in that kind of Big Sur trek, right? San Francisco down to San Luis Obispo. Then you have this first, like, okay, this is our first actual like family one, and you get stuck in Logan. And then after this night, sounds like you just boogied down out of Logan and headed back home and said we're done.
Oh yeah,
Um,
record times.
One day, 80 miles in one day.
that's
And it
that's
was also
impressive.
so hot, we'd buy bags of ice and put them next to our baby
It was
Oh,
so good.
in a towel. We're like, "Here's some air conditioning for you."
The ice was in the towel, not the baby.
so since that adventure, before Brittany started taking over the logistics, did you start using like couchsurfing.net or any of those websites in your tours, in your travels? Okay.
No. But we
Because
did
essentially that's what you were doing at this point. You're couch surfing randomly. So
I don't know they had that then, did they?
yeah, I
It
think
was
they
probably
did.
a little before then. No, maybe
We
not.
well then we and the next trip was we rode down the coast with a 1 and 3 year old from Seattle to it was 700 miles to Crescent City, California, and
okay.
that one was cool, but still bad traffic and hilly. And then it was after that that we discovered the Loire River in France, or a lot of the trails in Europe, the Danube, things like
The
that.
bike trails, yeah.
So Brittany, at what point did you feel like, okay, I'm done with this like crazy unplanned camp wherever couch surfing vibe and I'm gonna take over logistics on these trips?
I'm pretty tolerant, and it takes a little while for things to kind of build until I crack. And then I'm like, that's it. And so it kind of like, I slowly kind of took over like equipment and logistics, but it had to be kind of a slow, steady takeover until finally, like this last trip, I'm just like, I'm just going to take care of all of our gear and make sure that we have a route, and you can mess up the route later, but I'm going to plan it now the way that I want it.
Yep.
It works.
So so on these adventures, how much of it now is camping or like throwing down a tent or several tents on the side of the road versus Airbnb or hotel or like chalet style stays?
It's like 100% camping, and
Okay.
but in campsites,
Yeah.
which we've done a lot in Europe, and the reason we prefer to go there is just their campsites are amazing. You end up with swimming pools and tennis courts and lakes, and I mean, there's just a lot of fun to be had at these different little campsites, and they're pretty like the trails that we've been doing. You don't have to. You can 20 miles and you're at another campsite. It's not like an extended amount of time before you hit the next one.
And it seems like campsites are abundant enough. Like I've never camped in Europe. I've backpacked Europe. I've done the train thing, right? But it's always been probably 80% Airbnb, 20% hotel. And so I haven't done any camping over there. So are the campgrounds, sounds like the campgrounds are pretty abundant over there.
Oh yeah,
Okay.
there's a bunch. It depends on where you're at and in which country you're in. France, for instance, is like our favorite because there's just campsites everywhere. They love to camp. So, I mean, the United States is a little different. It's a little bit harder to find campsites. They're a little bit more stretched out.
It's a
But
lot easier in the west than it is in the east, obviously, just because there's more natural forest or national forest and BLM land in the west than
yeah.
there is back east. But
And that's not to say that we don't run into problems and we have to sometimes kind of boondock or whatever, just kind of camp with no campsite. We've had to do that on a handful of occasions.
so which trip has been the favorite?
What's your favorite?
I think the last one that we did from the Mediterranean to the North Sea is my favorite.
Yeah, it was awesome.
So walk us through that route. What route did you take?
There's a series of Eurovelo routes in Europe, or bike routes in Europe called Eurovelo. So Euro and then VELO. So like Euro bike routes.
Yep.
And there are 13, 17. There's like
15,
I think,
17,
yeah.
yeah, something like that.
So we did, and they'll go through rivers and whatever. You can go all over Western Europe on bike trails. But this one, we took a cruise from New Jersey to Rome, but because we were going to take a train from Rome to the Alps, but even while on the cruise, we hadn't figured out that very last piece. And I think it was for a reason. And a couple days before we got to Marseille, France, I found a route that was called the 17, Eurovelo 17. I'm like, babe, we could just get off. Let's ask the cruise ship people if they'll let us off early in Marseille. And then we can just ride 20 miles to get to the river. And sure enough, they let us do that. And it took about a day to make that decision together. But once we decided, we just got off the boat early. They didn't even check us in customs correctly, actually, because when we left, they're like, the German guy was like, it doesn't
This
even
was when
show
we were
that
trying to come home.
Yeah.
And we were showing our passports, and they're like,
it doesn't even
what?
show that you came here. So we're just going to give you these back, and you're just going to go.
You're going to get somebody in trouble.
Yeah. But so we went up the Eurovelo 15, up the Rhone River, and
Okay.
then down the Rhine River. So we went up to about just under 8,000 feet with a mountain pass, and then we went down the Rhine River to Amsterdam, and that was the Eurovelo 15.
Yeah, so
Okay.
we started at sea level and slowly made our way up to the mountains. And
So you
then
went from Marseille, like, so so the Rhone goes up to where? Like, where did you guys kind of peak out? What area? Was that like
Andermatt.
on?
So you go through France and then Switzerland. You get into Switzerland at Geneva, and then you'll follow
Yep.
the lake,
Constance?
Lake Constance, I think.
No, I get them
No,
all
it's
mixed
another
up.
one. Not Bodensee. It is Constance, I think.
I think it is. I
Maybe.
think
Anyways,
Constance and
you
Bodensee is
follow
same
the
thing.
lake all the way up, and then you go into the Alps. So for the first month, you gain 2,000 feet, and then over a week and a half, you gain another 2,500 feet, and then in a day, we gained 3,500 feet.
It's a long
Over
day. Yeah, that's a tough day.
That was our most epic riding day we've ever done in our entire
Ever.
family career ever. Was climbing that mountain in one day.
Yeah. So what did the kids think of that overall? Like, and how did, like, actually, before we get to that, what does this look like? So you two are on bikes, and then between your six kids, how many of them are on their own bikes?
So they're like from the she was 8 at the time. So from the 8-year-old up to the 15-year-old, they're all on bikes. So that's 4 of them on bikes. And then we have a bike trailer for the littlest kid who was like 2 turning 3. And then there was also on Dale's bike, I found this product. What's it called? I'm going to call it the wrong name.
So you have
It's
like
not
is it like a trailer bike?
It's no, we do have one of those too. I'll tell you about that. It's like it's not the shotgun. It's the Mac Ride,
yes, the
and
Mac
it's
Ride.
made for mountain biking. And
Okay.
it goes behind the handlebars of the adult on the drop post. The is it called a drop post?
Yeah,
Anyways,
on
it
your
goes
handlebar
there,
post.
and so like a little kid can sit right there. He can use your handlebars, so he's like
Oh,
right
interesting.
in the action, and they
Yeah,
have a little place for their feet. And our 3-year-old loved that. That was like his favorite place. That's where he always wanted to be.
I
And
bet.
then
Like he's right up there, right in front of
he was
everything.
right in
That's
the
awesome.
action. They
Yeah.
kind of fought over the 5-year-old and the 3-year-old kind of fought over that position of who got to be in that front little captain's chair like most of the trip. So we had to, anyways. And then we do have like a trailer bike kind of thing. It was made in Europe, and again, I'm gonna forget the name of it. When Dale comes back in, he'll tell us. But
So the 5-year-old and the 3-year-old would switch off in the front seat versus the trailer, just kind of
depending
switching off
on
between
when
those two.
if they were tired or not,
Yeah.
like the thing about biking is you start to if the kids aren't moving, they start to get tired, so you have to switch them.
Yeah. Yeah, like my wife and I do a little bit of biking, but when our kids were little, like my wife was training for Ironman and stuff, so she'd haul them around in the bike trailer all the time. So we're
Yeah,
definitely familiar with that. But
good
um
training.
so which so is this like the kids' favorite trip, or would they cite a different trip?
They probably would say this one.
Okay.
I mean, they have very short memories too, so it's like they just say bike trips, and so it's all just kind of blurred together for them. I think
Yeah.
this one might have been the favorite for them though, because some of the campgrounds that we stayed at had water parks, and because it wasn't the busy season, we had the water park literally to ourselves and
Oh
this one
wow.
other family, and there were no lifeguards. So the kids kind of just could run amok and do what they wanted to do at this. It was a legitimate water park. So
I bet they love that. Yeah.
they did. That
We stayed an
created,
extra day.
yeah. We're like, we can just stay here longer.
That's the beauty of not having campsites or hotels or Airbnbs as well, is especially low season. We never in 3 months we made 3 reservations,
Yeah.
2 or 3.
Yeah.
Otherwise, we showed up and we stayed. If we liked something, we stayed there longer.
That's awesome. So what months did you do this in then? Remind me.
May, June, July,
Okay.
The end of May.
beginning of May.
Was it the beginning?
We left at the end of April.
Oh yeah. We
So
had to
you,
homeschool the kids for a month, so.
okay. So you took a cruise from New Jersey and then got off early in Marseille, and then
And
you
that's
rode
how
up.
we had all of our bikes like stacked in our rooms. So,
Okay.
yeah.
We had one big room. It wasn't. It was like $200 more to get a like a cheap family suite.
Oh, nice.
So
No, that's
great people.
great.
It was awesome.
Yeah. Especially if you have to haul your bikes with you. So then and then you flew home from Germany or
Amsterdam.
Amsterdam. Okay. So, okay. No, and it took you 3 months to go on that adventure. That's like you bring up the kind of the flexibility, right? Like, so that's one of the things that I loved about road tripping too, was if we wanted to stay somewhere, right? Like we could stay, right? Like we could stick around and be a little longer, or if we were just like, yeah, this place isn't that great, let's keep driving. So, um,
I'd
yeah,
say
that's
cost too. The cost. Our family, once we were on tour on the road, probably $5,000 a month.
okay.
8 people, so
Yeah.
really cheap. So we spent a month in Switzerland for $5,000.
Yeah, that's not like,
6 maybe.
yeah, for 8 people, that's not bad at all, right? Like, that's great. So, so what is, like, we kind of talked about, so you just kind of bike down to the store, you just bike around. Is that the extent of training, is just like, hey, we're always on bikes and that's what we do when we're around town? Or is there anything more formal training wise as you guys get ready for something like this?
There's really not. The whole, like, the first week of the bike tour is kind of your training. You slowly get into it, and because it's a bike, it's kind of low impact already.
Yeah.
Unless you're climbing hills, but we always try to make sure to not have to be climbing hills that first week, kind of thing.
Okay. No, I think that's for anybody that wants to do this, that's great advice, right? Like, okay, go out and so that first week, so you said your first day was a 20-mile day to ride to the river. Is it regularly 20-mile days that first week, or is it a little easier than that, or what does that typically
We
look like?
average 30 miles a day, 25, 30.
Okay.
And we kind of jump into that average quickly. So it may be on the lower end,
Yeah, I
but
try to keep the miles a little bit lower the first few days, but you still have to cover ground. You
Okay.
still have to get to the campsite.
Do the kids get any insight on where you go and what the route looks like, or is it like mom and dad plan this and you just come along?
Yeah. Maybe now that the 15-year-old is, he can do some research. We have given them the option of, like, okay, here's where we're going. We want you guys to go and research and find out, what's in the areas that we're going to be in, and what you want to do. But it seems that they don't care that much because they don't put any effort into making that happen. So they're pretty content just having us figure it out for them.
Yeah, our son is 18, and as he got to about 14, 15, then it was kind of like he found the magic of Google Maps.
Oh,
And
fun.
so it was like, okay, I want to go eat here, or let's go check this place out, or this looks really cool, right? Like, and so then the road trip started to become a little more, he started to have a
Personal.
little more input, all right? Like, um, and so he's still the only one that when we travel really gives that kind of input. We took him to Europe a couple years ago, him and his older sister, and his older sister was just kind of like, yeah, okay, whatever. But he was like, oh, look, Les Mis is playing. Let's go see it. Oh, let's go here, right? Like, and so as a 16, 17-year-old, right? Like, it was like, yeah, I want to be involved in planning because I want to go see awesome stuff, right? But,
mm,
I wish one of our kids would have that personality. That would be great. That would be
well,
very helpful.
I think what you talk about, right? Like here in the next couple of years, I think you'll start to experience that, right? Like as they start to feel the freedom and like, oh, okay, like yeah, this looks cool, or let's go see this. I think you'll start to see that. So, but so what's the hardest thing logistically that you've dealt with on some of these trips, other than sleeping in some random dude's spare bedroom unexpectedly?
I think trains are definitely the hardest. Sometimes you like to get to the start of a trail, like you fly into, whatever big cities nearby, and you have to get your bikes from the airport to your start location. I think that those are always the hardest logistically. And getting the bikes either to, like, on airplanes. Anytime you have to pack up your bike and put it on a mode of transportation, it is hard.
That that's a really interesting thing. So, okay, so you took the cruise, right? Like just using this trip. Are the
That was the
bikes,
easiest way to do it.
but are the bikes in bike boxes?
uh-huh.
They were. Mhm.
And did you ship then the bike boxes from Marseille to Amsterdam, or did you carry them with you?
No, so well, and all of it is harder when you have 8 of these things.
Yeah,
Like
I'm sure.
Easy if you've got
if
two
it
or
were
three.
just if the two of us were going to take a train, it wouldn't be a stress.
Yeah.
When there's 10 people, trying to get on a train that only has 5 spots, you're like stopping the train, you're breaking all the rules, and you're like stacking bikes and gear on top of each other in the hallway, and people are like, you can't even have this on there. Well, it's too late. This train's got to be on. It's like, it's a real pain, and
Public nuisance.
you have to be so assertive
Yeah.
to do that. So with bike boxes, everything we transport things in, it's really interesting going on a bike tour, because in your regular life you can have things with you that and just you can put it in your car, you can leave things, you can take stuff this time and then not the other time. But when you're going on vacation on a bike tour, everything you bring will be on your bike for 3 months.
Yeah.
And you only have so much space because you need to carry food and everything else. So we transport everything in cardboard. And then there's like the one pair of casual shoes that are not bike shoes that you bring, maybe sandals. But it's an exercise of like, not what you're going to bring. It's what else can I take out of my gear and not bring?
And not suffer for later.
Every trip
Yeah.
we've sent home 10 pounds.
Yeah.
At least
This last trip was bad.
Even from Europe, we sent home 10 or 15 pounds of stuff and we spent weeks getting ready and taking stuff out. What else can we not have?
Yeah.
But you also need things because you're going to be there for 3 months.
So I'm still fascinated. I'm still hung up on the bike boxes. Where do they go?
You throw them in the garbage.
Okay, so you're using just a cardboard bike box.
Use cardboard bike boxes, and on the way out, I leave the family. That's the one night we spent in a hotel in Amsterdam. I leave the family that morning, and I go to town, and I find 8 bike boxes, and I spend all day boxing everything up. I rode with my trailer.
All of that.
I just say, you watch the kids, and I have a bike trailer riding with like 5 bike boxes, folded up on my bike trailer, riding 8 miles to get that.
But now in the day of Uber, we could make that simpler soon.
An Uber driver's not even going to let me take, maybe an Uber XL, but like it's just a pain.
Yeah. No,
they can be folded up, whatever.
That's tough, right? Because like thinking about Amsterdam, right? Like Schiphol is not in town, right? Like it's like the airport is out away from town, but there's a nice train that runs between the two. But there's
bike paths.
Lots of bike
we
paths.
take the bike paths.
Yeah, lots of bike paths. But like just trying to find bike boxes and get those between
And
town airport
actually sells them. So
do they? Oh, that's nice.
It's actually easier.
You can buy some. So I think we ended up buying some. We collected some and bought them. They're like 20 or 30 euros each. But that's like everything else is easier. The logistics piece. So if I had a family, and the more money you want to spend, the easier you can make things easier just by spending money. I'm like mentally challenged with being frugal and wanting to like be scrappy. It's just like inborn of like, we're going to find these bike boxes, we're going to do this. But if somebody like doesn't want to, and we've done it 10 times, if somebody doesn't want to do that, they, you can relieve some of those stresses. Even buying the bikes there. Decathlon is the largest sporting goods chain in the world. They do like $13.5 billion in revenue, and they have 1,000 plus stores. You could go and outfit yourself with the bike and the racks and everything else there for yourself, and then you could just. I've had times where we've just sold our bikes at the very last stop, not family bikes, but like at the airport. I've posted stuff on Willhaben or like on a marketplace and met people at the airport to buy our bike trailer or an extra bike, or I post it like, who wants a free bike? I'm not bringing this one home. Oh, my buddy's in Vienna. He'll take it. And I leave it next to a fence and he gets it.
Well, and I think there's like, especially when you're looking at like a bike trailer, right? Like it's almost worth sometimes buying like the bike trailer out there and then selling it out there, because it's just probably so cost prohibitive to take it on the airplane with you.
Yeah.
Well, and sometimes those trailers will count as baby items.
Okay. So
it's always a baby item.
If it's a single,
if
it's a single, I can understand that. If it's a double.
It's a double.
We've had doubles be baby items.
As long as you
check
it.
Wow, that's impressive.
If you check it at the ticketing counter, you can sometimes, if they're nice, they'll sometimes still take it as a baby item.
Okay.
But you can't take it through security.
I've never paid for one.
Yeah, not yet.
Okay, well, that's impressive. So
I think we lucked out though at the last. Like I think anybody else would have charged us big time, but that lady was really nice.
No, That's great. Again, it goes back to the hospitality of humans, right? Like
Oh,
people are generally good people, but I can see it being a prohibitive thing for in some cases, right? Like cuz a double bike trailer is not small.
no.
Like yeah, you can make it look like a stroller by putting the stroller wheels in and take out the bike attachment and what but like it's big. like
We
like
have
it's
to shut it all the way down, like collapse it completely,
yeah.
kind of thing.
So what kind of bike trailer? Do you have a preference on the bike trailer? Is it a Burley? Is it a
We
Chariot?
like
Is it
Chariot. Thule bought Chariot, so they're Thule.
yeah.
Um, they're great.
Yeah, we've loved them. Anyone, there's especially if you can get one that has a seat that lays down, like they can either, the seats can either come up or come down. That's really, really helpful. And a mesh area where their heads can go is always way more comfortable too. And we
Nice.
need and we need a basket, some sort of like extra storage space on there because we always, that's like where we keep our food that is needs to be at hand, snacks and oh sorry. um yeah, that like so that's like super needed as well.
So what type of bikes are you riding? Are they road bikes or are they like a gravel bike or is it a hybrid?
They're like gravel bikes.
Okay.
But with bigger tires.
Hmm.
It's like a commuter to more than
Hmm.
a gravel.
So almost like a beach cruiser but in maybe a little more downward
It's
positioning.
it's more like they're more like gravel than beach cruiser. I think you're like 1.5 inch wide tires. So
Okay.
it's like they're bike touring bikes, but they're
Yeah.
more upright than road bikes.
Yeah, you don't have the drop bars on the or for the handles, just the straight across bar, you know.
So are you graphite or aluminum or does it matter
Steel.
like
Deal
Steel. It's
steel?
it's not
about endurance.
you can bike tour on a lot of different stuff. So some people go all out and have really, really nice bikes and we have nice bikes. But we've also toured like I toured 3,500 miles with some friends that bought $150 bikes. They were new, like used $150 bikes, right? So
Yeah.
they were probably $500 or $600 bikes, but you don't have to spend a lot. If you went to Decathlon and spent $350, you could go tour for 2 months on that bike.
Okay. So you're
That
not
is
having to
something.
shell. You're not. So if you flew over and you were outfitting yourself there, you wouldn't have to be like dropping a 1,500 to 4 grand
No.
on your equipment.
And the tour, if anybody I talk to has interested in doing that, like the easiest one for anyone to do in Europe is you fly to Paris, you take a train to a town called Nantes, 2 hours. You rent bikes at one of their shops for $150 a week, give or take, whatever. And then they have a network of shops that goes 250 miles to Orleans or Lyon. So you can ride along the Loire River and just drop off your bike. They also rent you panniers if you want as well. And then
Oh,
you take a
nice.
train. Then you take a train back to Paris and you fly home.
Okay,
And if you went further, you could just buy your bike at Decathlon.
got it. No, that's great. Like, yeah, that makes it really easy to be, and that's one of the things that I'm fascinated with in Europe is how easy it is to rent bikes just anywhere, right? Like even if you want to just bike around Paris, you can use the public bike rental system, and it's like €2 a day, and
Yeah.
as long as you return it within 30 minutes, you don't get charged again, and you can keep checking out bikes all day long. And and when we were in Geneva, we rented bikes in Geneva, but all you had to do was give them €50, and then when you brought the bike back, they gave you your €50 back, and so it was
What?
a free bike rental.
That's awesome.
And yeah, it was awesome. And we went to when we were in Paris, we went out to Giverny to go to oh shoot now I forget the artist's name. Gardens, Ponds. Br-
Versailles.
no, the is the artist's house. Why
In
can't
where?
oh
Which town? Sorry.
Is it Van Gogh?
Giverny? No, it's not Van Gogh. It's
That one.
Not the Da
um
Vinci House.
Da Vinci. That's the one I was thinking of.
oh, I can't. Why can't I remember now? Okay, totally slipped my mind, but it'll come back to me right after this podcast. But we rented bikes, so we took a train out there, and then we rented bikes to bike over to his house and to his property. And and it was like I think we spent like €2 or €3 a person to rent the bikes. Like it was super cheap,
Nice.
right? Like bikes are so accessible out there, and there's bike paths and places to travel all over the place. So yeah, I can understand why you would want to go do it in Europe for sure. Plus, drivers are more aware of cyclists out there than they are here. So I've known too many people that have had too many serious incidents here in the U.S. riding a
We,
bike.
we that's why we choose trails. Every family bike tour we've done since after the first two, they're primarily on dedicated bike paths.
Yeah, that's great. Makes sense.
Then we can just crash into each other.
Yeah,
So
and that
everybody
happens.
still gets hurt, but it's never bad.
So, so I assume you've had some failures on these experiences, and how do you respond to failure when you're in these moments?
I laugh usually, or make light of things.
And then people get
But
mad at him for doing that.
it,
I
it
was
just
gonna say,
no,
how do the
it's not
kids
laughing
respond to
in a
that?
positive way. It's more like, "Shut up, Dad." One of the trips, every time it rained, um, I would often quote the Frozen song, "I've seen dark before, but not like this." Every time, "Shut up, Dad. Shut up, Dad." But my 4-year-old loved me at that time because he was digging Frozen at the time.
Yeah.
How do we respond to hard times?
Like backtracking just a little bit, I think something that helped us, like, for the whole trip to have like a little bit different perspective on it. This last trip, we tried to see every day at the end of the day, we asked the kids, okay, how did you see the hand of God today? And I loved doing that because it changed the way that we thought about things every day. It's like, because every time they could see something positive in negative experiences that we went through, but instead of focusing on the negative, we focused on the positive. And so even though we were like going through hard times, and like, or like there wasn't a campsite, so we had to keep riding or whatever, like there's always something, but it really helped us to focus on the positive and to see like just how much God had blessed us that day, and like where things could have been worse but they weren't, that kind of thing. That helps in an overall, like, for the whole trip, how to handle the negative things that happen, you know. And then I think just as the negative things come, just continue to like, well, we could still be stuck back there, or like there's just always pointing out the positives of things.
Yeah, I think that's powerful. Looking at how have we been blessed throughout the day, right? Like that sense of gratitude, that sense of recognizing, like, okay, yeah, it was hard, it was brutal, there were these failures, but here's how we overcame it. Here's the successes. Here's the moments of that we need to be grateful for. Here's the moments of triumph, right? And
Mm-hmm.
recognizing that almost more of an abundance mindset of like, okay, there's this greatness and there's this power
Yeah.
versus just this scarcity negative. Um, yeah, we couldn't control this, and now now we're miserable, right? Like instead of approaching it that way, looking at that sense of gratitude, that's fabulous. Um,
I would add to that, it's easy for us because we've been on a lot of adventures and we know that every night you're most likely going to end up in a warm bed and it'll be fine. Where the kids, they understand that at all different levels. The 5-year-old, their perspective, or the 8-year-old's perspective, riding it on their first time, long day, it's raining. The 15-year-old or the 13-year-old may be able to be a support to them. So we see a lot of that where they're like, in the 8-year-old's mind, it may be the end of the world. This is bad. It's late. Everybody's a little stressed. Like, what is this? But our son may take them, may take her under their wing and, hey, be my riding buddy. And they make that work. And so that's a cool thing. When there is a challenge, anyone can step up to kind of help everyone dwell on the positive more. And so you give the kids a chance to be the winner. And then Brittany also came up with something called the yellow jersey that was like really inspired and super awesome, where every day at the end of the day, she had this little safety vest, and she wrote yellow jersey MVP on the back of it, and whoever displayed or demonstrated the most like good qualities that day, like, oh, you were helpful, had a good attitude, whatever, she'd call it out, and then they got that the next day, and they would get extra treats. They'd get to go into the store when we went in if everybody wasn't able to go in, and they were just, they got extra benefit that day, and the kids were really motivated by it. And they'd
That's
also nominate each other. Yeah, he should have it.
Yeah, I was really grumpy yesterday. We didn't have it.
that's awesome. I love what you pointed out there as far as like the dynamic with your children, right? Like, and I think there's a powerful dynamic. Like, it's one thing when mom and dad are like the encouragement, right? Like, shut up, dad, right? Like, stop singing this, right? Like, but when their peers, when their siblings become the motivator, become the like take them under their wing, there's a lot more power to that, right? And there's a lot of opportunity for them to grow together
Yes.
because of that. So that's a really cool thing, and that would I bet you saw that a lot on through. You continue to see these throughout these adventures. That's pretty awesome.
I really feel like we do because it's such a different, it's just so much harder than your everyday life. So I don't like, we don't see such great like growth experiences as at home as we do on the, I mean, you see growth experience at home, but like on the bike tour, it's just so hard and like everybody's trying and like, I don't know, it just creates this environment of vulnerability again and everyone needing to kind of pull together and it creates a whole nother mindset. Like, what am I trying to get at, Dale? Like, I
There's a
don't know.
powerful sense of community that
It
you're
is. It
establishing
is.
amongst your family for sure.
And it's hard to have that anywhere else because it's you just don't get that much. I don't know.
It's
Well,
just a
it's
more real
really
environment for life to, it's a rich experience.
yeah, as we do something hard together, we're working through it together, right? And that solidifies and bonds that community even more so
Yes.
because when we're at home, oftentimes we're off in our own little bedrooms or
Yes.
corners of the house or whatever or different activities and we're spread apart as a family, whereas when we're on an adventure together, there's this solidifying nature and bringing together of the community. So,
Yeah,
well,
that's what I said.
yeah, it's been a pleasure. I want to wrap with like, do you guys keep a blog or do you just have public information on where people can keep up with your travels, or is that
You
kind of more?
know, I'm mostly active like on Facebook, just Dale Majors. And I've had, connected with people there. We'll do better in the future. Sometimes we do trip reports, but it's so busy just living the experience
Yeah,
that we've kind of chosen to at some point we'll get somebody to come along that creates more content.
For us, we're not very good at it.
But it's hard enough to just be dad
no, I
while you
understand that. Yeah, I
while you're
understand that.
doing it.
Well, you do have that. What's that blog?
We do. So family bike touring, I think, but we haven't, it's been a year and a half and I haven't put all the video content together. So
But it is a good like I
so
enjoy.
DaleMajors.com has our 2017 trip actually.
Yeah.
It has an
Okay,
overview of like the 50 days. So if someone wanted to see that kind of trip, but we did write a bike touring guide that is very much incomplete, but I share it with people. So if anybody emails me at dale@ventureanyway.com, I will email them the bike touring guide. And that's just a compilation of pictures and gear list and different tips for bike touring with kids.
great. We'll drop that in the show notes so that we have it. So, but thank you both, Brittany, Dale. It was a pleasure. Appreciate your time today. So,
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks,
yeah,
Jeremy.
yep. Thank you. Thanks for joining A Bit of Curiosity. We appreciate y'all.
See ya.